I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, last week we speculated about whether or not the legislature was getting it together to end this special session on time. Well, it's a week later, as I said. Are they getting closer?
Yeah, the big issues that have sort of been at issue for months appear to be pretty much resolved. They have agreed upon and passed a tax cut package, sent it to Governor Scott, that cuts about $400 million in taxes. That was a big issue, has been a big issue for truly months, and it's also a big priority of Governor Scott's and the House. The Senate had been sort of kind of taking a wait and see attitude on tax cuts because of some other issues. But now, once the budget negotiations started, they were able to come to agreement on tax cuts and pass them out pretty easily. The biggest part of that tax cut package is cutting the communication services tax, which is people pay on their cable bills and their cable TV bills and their satellite TV bills and their cell phone bills. And that's the biggest chunk of it. But there's also a lot of other kind of goodies in there. They've got a 10-day sales tax holiday for people when they go back to right before school starts, for people when they buy clothes and school supplies, and you know, there's those sorts of things, and there's a lot of littler, smaller things in the package as well. But that was a big thing to come to agreement on, because the House, while the House wanted originally to cut almost $700 million in taxes, it was important that they get that issue resolved to allow things to move forward.
And the Senate for a while was saying, you know, if we don't get more money for Medicaid expansion and to fund hospitals doing a lot of work with indigent care, maybe there should be no tax cuts. But there has been a meeting of the minds to do some tax cuts and also to backfill the LIP program, right?
Well, and that was what the Senate's wait, as I said, the wait and see was that they wanted money for the low-income pool program, which is the LIP program, which provides money to the primarily to hospitals to care for uninsured people. And there's a big cut in that funding coming from the federal government for the coming year. The Senate wanted to put in state money to help make up that difference, but they needed to come to agreement with the House on that. And that once they did that, it allowed the tax cut package to go forward as well. What they've agreed upon is to basically put about $400 million of state general revenue into helping offset that cut in the low-income pool program. By putting in that $400 million, they draw down about $600 million in federal Medicaid money. So it helps offset what is about a $1.2 billion cut in the LIP program. So that was the priority of the Senate. The tax cuts were the priority of the House. Once those two issues got resolved, they could kind of move forward together.
They also had to agree on what dollars different hospitals would get, right?
Well, and that was a big part of it as well. They agreed on the $400 million for general revenue to go into this, again, to help fill up the pot a little bit. But there is it's a very complicated system in which money gets divvied out to hospitals in a formula far more complex than I can imagine. But anyway, so every legislator is looking at what his or her hospital is going to get out of this. So there's long spreadsheets of where the money is going, but they had to resolve all that and come up with a formula to distribute the money. And they agreed to do that towards the end of the second week of the special session. And again, that was important for the budget in general, but also for the tax cut, to allow the tax cuts to move forward.
Another thing they had to do, the conferees, was to come up with a school funding formula. That's always a big issue, and that had been a big issue for Governor Scott as well. They did that, right?
Yeah, Governor Scott campaigned very heavily last year on having a record amount of per student funding in public schools. Part of that was because he was running against Charlie Crist, who, when he was governor, had the record. And Governor Scott used that as a campaign issue and pushed for it pretty hard. The legislature didn't get there, though. I mean, they are going to come in below the record number and definitely below where the governor wanted. Now, with that said, there is a fairly substantial increase that they are putting into this, but they did come to agreement. Again, this is a little bit of a fallout of that whole LIP issue, because if you divert general revenue to health care and you divert some to tax cuts, you don't have as much for schools. So, but there is an increase, and they will tell you it's a very sizable increase, but it isn't to the level that Governor Scott wanted.
Well, another big issue that's been in the background to some extent, not for the people who are interested in it, but it has huge fiscal impact, is environmental issues flowing from Amendment 1. How did that wind up, or how is it winding up?
Well, just to back up for a second, Amendment 1 was passed in November, and it requires the state to set aside 33% of dock stamp revenues. That's a tax on real estate sales for land and water types of projects.
And that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. I mean, it's it's more than $700 million, although the state was already putting about 450 into it, or in that neighborhood. So it's about $250 million increase, essentially.
For each budget.
For each budget for 20 years.
Right.
So then the question is, how does the legislature has the duty, though, to carry that out in terms of how do you spend that money, what types of projects. Actually, the House and the Senate generally have taken similar tacks on the types of projects they want to spend it on. But it has infuriated a lot of environmental groups, because they say that voters were approving this so that the state would buy land and conserve it.
A lot more than...
A lot more than what it has, and a lot more than what the legislature wants to do. One of the probably highlight issues of this, or high-profile issues of this, has been an effort by environmentalists to get the state to buy a bunch of land in the Everglades. One project that has been debated a lot would have purchased land from U.S. Sugar, but that deal's dead. And the environmentalists kept pushing to try to get more land bought in the Everglades as part of Everglades restoration. And the legislature is pretty much not going to do it, at least in the way the environmentalists want to do it. They have another issue that was at play was whether to bond some of this money. The House wanted to, the Senate didn't want to, and they turned out not to do it. By bonding that type of money, you can raise a whole lot of money up front. You essentially borrowing money.
Yeah, but so you owe it in the future.
You owe it in the future. But so anyway, they've come up with a plan that is a lot less money devoted to land acquisition, those types of projects, than what the environmentalists want. There's talk that the environmentalists may file a lawsuit saying that the legislature has violated this constitutional amendment. I don't know, at this point, it's premature to know whether that's going to happen, but and also what the legal chances are. But the environmental groups are pretty unhappy about the way the legislature's handled this.
Thanks, Jim. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.